The night Lucas told me, the car smelled like stale fast food fries, and the peppermint gum I kept in the center console for long drives. It was after midnight, that hush hour when even the streetlights feel like they're trying not to wake anyone. The freeway was mostly empty, just the occasional semi-truck gliding past like a dark ship, and our headlights kept carving the same pale tunnel through the darkness. We hadn't planned to be out that late. We'd been at a friend's house, Caleb and Renee, supposedly, for a casual dinner, which turned into the kind of adult gathering where everyone talks too loudly about being tired and then stays up anyway. Renee had cried in the kitchen while the rest of us hovered in that helpless way, as if grief is a wild animal you can scare off by standing still. Caleb had moved out that morning. Divorce. The word felt too clean for something that looked like that. On the drive home, Lucas was quiet in a way that didn't match his usual post-party softness. Normally, he'd be loose-limbed, humming along to the radio, one hand on the wheel, and the other occasionally reaching over to touch my knee like a small reassurance. We're okay. We're us. Tonight, his jaw looked clenched even in the dash light, and he kept blinking like his eyes were dry. "Are you mad?" I asked, because my brain always tries to make tension into a problem I can solve. "No," he said immediately, too immediately. "Just thinking." He flicked his blinker on for an exit we didn't need, then corrected himself, staying on the freeway. My stomach tightened. It was such a small mistake, but Lucas didn't make those when he was calm. He was the kind of man who packed chargers before weekend trips. The kind of man who remembered our nephew's birthday before I did. 10 years of marriage teaches you the shapes of your person's moods like you learn the layout of your own kitchen in the dark. We drove for a few minutes with the radio low, some late-night host talking softly between songs. The air conditioning breathed cold on my bare forearm. I watched Lucas's knuckles on the steering wheel, pale in the glow. "Renee said something," he murmured, more to the windshield than to me. "She said a lot," I said gently. He swallowed. "She said the worst part wasn't Caleb leaving. It was realizing he'd been leaving for years, and she didn't know, like there were whole rooms inside him she never got invited into." I stared out at the passing city lights. "Yeah," I said. Yeah." Lucas's voice went thinner. And then she said, "I would have stayed if he'd just told me the truth earlier, even if it was ugly. Even if it scared me." The radio host's voice faded behind the sound of tires on asphalt. Lucas breathed in like he was about to dive underwater. "I don't want to be that," he said. I turned toward him. "What do you mean?" He kept driving, eyes forward, but his shoulders looked like they were trying to fold inward. "I don't want to be someone with secret rooms," he said. "Not with you." My heart thumped, quick and uncertain. "Lucas, do you have something to tell me?" He laughed once, sharp and joyless. "Yeah," he said, and then, like ripping off a bandage he'd been pressing down for years, he blurted, "I'm bisexual?" The sentence landed in the car like a dropped glass. I felt it shatter in my chest before my mind caught up. The word bisexual didn't feel like a concept in that moment. It felt like a sudden shift in gravity. "What?" I said, and it came out smaller than I meant it to. Lucas's hands tightened on the wheel. "I'm bi," he repeated, voice trembling now. "I've always been, and I'm tired of not saying it out loud." My first reaction was pure blankness, like my brain had thrown a white sheet over everything until it could decide what to do. Then the feelings rushed in, fast and messy. Shock, confusion, and almost reflexive fear that tasted like metallic panic. Are you leaving me?" I heard myself ask, the words tumbling out like I'd rehearsed them in nightmares. Lucas jerked his head toward me, horrified. "No, God, no." He took the next exit abruptly, not to leave the freeway so much as to stop moving. We rolled into an empty gas station parking lot, the kind with harsh overhead lights and a locked convenience store. He put the car in park and sat there, breathing hard, like the confession had knocked the wind out of him. "I'm not leaving," he said again, slower, as if saying it carefully might make it true enough for my frightened brain to believe. "This isn't a prelude. It's not a warning. It's just the truth. I stared at him. The man I'd married, Lucas, with his careful hands and silly inside jokes. Lucas, who cried at documentaries about whales. Lucas, who made coffee exactly the way I liked it, and never once mocked my obsession with color-coded pantry bins. A man can be all of that and still be bisexual. I knew that in theory, but in the claustrophobic intimacy of our car, with the fluorescent light flattening everything, theory didn't help me. My throat tightened. "Why now?" I whispered. He pressed his palms to his eyes, then dropped his hands, looking exhausted. "Because I'm scared," he admitted. "Because watching Caleb and Renee, it made me realize how secrets rot, and I don't want 10 more years to pass, and then you find out in some accidental way and feel like I lied to you." I swallowed. Have you been with men since we've been together?" "No," he said immediately. "No, Olivia, no. I've never cheated on you. Not with anyone." He looked like he was in pain. "This isn't about wanting to go do something. It's about being tired of hiding a part of myself, like it's shameful." The word shame hit me like a pinprick. I felt guilty, even as fear still buzzed in my limbs. "I didn't know you were hiding," I said softly. "I didn't let you know," he said. "That's on me." I stared at my hands in my lap. My wedding ring caught the overhead light and flashed. My brain tried to do its usual sorting, its neat filing system. Bisexual means attraction to more than one gender. Attraction isn't action, truth isn't betrayal. And yet, something tender and insecure in me kept whispering, "What if you aren't enough?" I hated that voice. I hated that it existed at all. Lucas hadn't said he wanted anyone else. He hadn't said I was lacking. He'd just offered me a truth. But being offered truth doesn't stop you from feeling threatened by it, and that was its own kind of shame. I felt two selves inside me, the self who loved Lucas and believed in him, and the self who had been taught in a million subtle ways that a marriage is a competition you can lose. Lucas waited, eyes searching my face like he was bracing for a verdict. "I don't know what I'm supposed to say," I admitted. "You don't have to say anything right now," he said quickly, too eager. Then he softened. "But I need you to hear me. I love you. I chose you. I'm here." I looked at him then, really looked. His eyes were wet. His cheeks had blotches of red like he'd been holding his breath for years. And beneath my shock, something else stirred, an ache of tenderness, because he wasn't confessing like someone who'd been caught. He was confessing like someone stepping into the light with trembling hands. "I believe you," I said, and I meant it. My voice shook anyway. "I just feel blindsided." He nodded, relief and regret mixing on his face. "That's fair." The drive home afterward was quieter, but it wasn't the old kind of quiet. It was the quiet of a house after you rearrange the furniture, everything familiar, but the pathways changed. In bed, I lay awake listening to Lucas breathe beside me, and my mind replayed the moment over and over. Bisexual, the word, the way he said it, the way his hands had shaken. I kept asking myself what it meant for us, and every time my brain tried to leap to answers, decisions, conclusions, I felt Lucas's earlier panic in my bones. Not decisions, truth. By morning, my first instinct was to pretend it hadn't happened, to move through the day like usual, because usual is a balm. But Lucas's confession had shifted something in me. I couldn't unknow it, and I didn't want to punish him by treating it like a grenade. We made coffee, we fed the cat, we moved around each other like careful dancers. Finally, at the kitchen table, I said, "I don't want to make any big decisions right now." Lucas's shoulders sagged with visible relief. "Okay. But I also don't want to shove it back into a box," I continued, and my voice surprised me with its steadiness. "Because that would mean you can't be honest, and I don't want that." He stared at his mug, then nodded. "Okay." I took a breath. "What if we do a trial period?" I said slowly, shaping it as I spoke. "Like 90 days. No action, just honesty. Questions are allowed, feelings are allowed, but we don't decide anything big. We don't threaten divorce. We don't make promises we can't keep. We just Tell the truth and see what happens. Lucas's eyes lifted to mine. A pact, he said. Yeah, I said. A pact. His mouth trembled like he might cry. I can do that, he whispered. Thank you. The first week of our pact felt like learning a new language while still trying to speak the old one. I asked him questions that made me blush in my own kitchen, questions I'd never thought to ask after 10 years because I'd assumed our map was complete. When did you first know? Did Deb know? No, Deb was Renee's story. Lucas and I had our own. Did you ever date men? Do you feel like you're missing out? What scares you the most? Lucas answered carefully, sometimes haltingly, like he was stepping around old landmines. He told me he'd known since his teens, that he'd pushed it down because he didn't see examples of bi and married that weren't jokes or tragedies. He told me he'd been afraid that saying it out loud would make me see him differently, would make me feel like I'd married someone I didn't recognize. He told me the fear wasn't that he'd suddenly become a different person, but that I'd decide the person he had always been was too complicated to love. That confession, more than the bisexuality itself, made something in me soften, because I understood fear of being too much. I'd been a straight woman in a world that loves calling women extra for having needs. I knew what it was to shrink yourself so you wouldn't be inconvenient. We started doing something that felt awkward at first, and then slowly became intimate. A nightly check-in, 10 minutes at the edge of the couch. No phones, no distractions. One question each. How are you feeling about the pact today? And what do you need from me tomorrow? Sometimes the answers were simple. I need a hug. I need reassurance. Sometimes the answers were messy. I'm scared you'll realize you want someone else. I'm scared you'll look at me and see a lie. One night, after a particularly honest check-in, Lucas said, "Can I tell you something that turns me on without it meaning I want to do it?" I blinked, caught off guard by the gentleness of the ask. Consent doesn't always look like yes or no. Sometimes it looks like a careful question that honors the other person's nervous system. "Okay," I said, heart thudding. "And I can tell you if it freaks me out." He nodded. "That's the deal." That was how we built our shared fantasy language, not as a secret code to escape our marriage, but as a way to bring the hidden parts into daylight safely. We named categories: what turned us on, what scared us, what was off limits. We gave ourselves permission to say, "That's a fantasy, not a request," and permission to say, "That one stays private," without anyone sulking or punishing. At first, I was shy. I didn't want to say the wrong thing and make Lucas feel like his honesty had been a mistake. But something strange happened when he started speaking more freely. I started feeling more free too. Not just sexually, though. Yes, that shifted. Emotionally. I realized how many assumptions I'd carried about what a husband is supposed to be, how narrow a box I'd kept him in without even knowing it. Our intimacy changed. Not in a dramatic, explicit way, but in a warmer, more playful one. We laughed more in bed. We talked more. Lucas's confidence grew like a plant finally given sunlight. And that confidence did something to me I didn't expect. It made me want him more. Not because bisexuality is inherently spicy, but because honesty is attractive. Watching Lucas stand in his truth, quietly, without theatrics, made him feel more present, more himself. There was a steadiness in him that hadn't been there before, like he'd stopped holding his breath. Still, my insecurity didn't vanish. It waited for tired nights, for moments when my brain was vulnerable. It showed up in grocery store aisles and on long walks. It whispered when Lucas glanced at someone in a movie. It whispered when we fought about dishes in the cat's litter box, and then, absurdly, my mind would add, "And also, you're bisexual. So maybe you want more than this life." The conflict peaked on a rainy Thursday, halfway through our 90 days. I'd had a long day at work. Lucas had too. We ate leftovers, standing at the counter like we were roommates instead of spouses. I could feel a pressure in my chest all evening, like something sharp lodged behind my ribs. When we sat down for our check-in, I tried to answer Lucas's question, "How are you feeling today?" with something polite, but my voice cracked anyway. I'm scared, I admitted. Lucas's eyes softened immediately. Tell me. The rain tapped against the kitchen window like impatient fingers. I stared at my hands, at my ring, at the faint indentation where my skin met the metal. I'm scared that I'm not enough, I said, and the sentence made my cheeks burn with humiliation. I know that's irrational. I know attraction isn't a deficit, but I keep thinking, if you're attracted to men and women, then how could one person satisfy you? And I hate myself for thinking it because it makes it sound like I'm accusing you of something you haven't done. Lucas sat very still, like he didn't want to spook me. Then he reached across the table, not grabbing, just resting his fingertips against mine. Olivia, he said softly, look at me. I lifted my eyes. Reluctantly, he swallowed. This isn't more need, he said. It's more truth. I blinked. He continued, voice steady, almost fierce in its tenderness. Being bisexual doesn't mean I'm missing half of myself when I'm with you. It means I have the capacity to be attracted to more than one gender. That's not a hunger I have to constantly feed. It's not a tally. It's just part of how I'm wired. My throat tightened. But what if I wake up one day and realize I want something else? He finished for me, because he'd been living with that fear too, just from the other side. Then we'll talk about it, but that's true in any marriage. Straight marriages end. Gay marriages end. People change. The only difference is that my capacity for attraction has been treated like a threat instead of a fact. Tears slid down my cheeks without permission. Lucas's thumb brushed my knuckles, gentle. I don't want to leave you, he said again. I want to be known by you, that's what this is. I'm not asking for an open marriage. I'm not asking to explore. I'm asking for the right to exist in our marriage without hiding. I pressed my lips together, trying not to sob. I want that, I whispered. I do. I feel stupid sometimes. You're not stupid, he said, and there was no impatience in it. You're human, and you're brave for saying it out loud. That night, we didn't fix everything. There isn't a single conversation that dissolves 10 years of cultural messaging, but something shifted. Lucas's words, more truth, not more need, became an anchor phrase we repeated when fear flared. When I spiraled, he didn't shame me. When he worried I'd see him differently, I didn't punish him with distance. We kept choosing the pact. Questions allowed, no decisions, honesty as the only rule. At the end of the 90 days, on a Sunday morning, when the light was soft and the coffee tasted unusually good, Lucas said, "So what now?" I looked at him across the table, this man who had been my husband for 10 years and somehow, through one terrifying confession, had become newly knowable. "We keep going," I said simply, "but with structure?" Lucas tilted his head. "I don't want to make this a one-time confession that we never revisit," I said, "and I don't want us to live in crisis mode, so we make a ritual, monthly check-ins, not just 10 minutes, like a real sit-down. We talk about what's working, what's scary, what we need. We give ourselves permission to be complex without turning complexity into catastrophe." Lucas's eyes filled. "A vow," he said, voice thick. "Yeah," I said. "A stronger vow than, for better or worse, because it includes the parts people don't say out loud." He nodded, and then he did something Lucas rarely did. He got up from the table and knelt in front of me, right there on the kitchen floor, like we were teenagers and the world was simple. He took my hands in his and pressed his forehead against my knuckles. "Will you marry me again?" he asked, half joking, half desperately sincere. My laugh turned into a sob. "Yes," I said. "Yes, idiot. We didn't tell anyone. We didn't book a venue or buy new rings. We didn't need witnesses for something that was about the two of us learning how to stay." That evening, we drove to a quiet overlook outside the city, a place we'd gone early in our dating days when we didn't have much money but wanted somewhere that felt like an occasion. The wind smelled like damp grass and distant rain. The skyline glittered in the distance like a scattered handful of coins. Lucas brought a small blanket. I brought 2 paper cups of hot chocolate because I'm sentimental and because it made me feel like we were still allowed to be soft. We stood at the edge of the overlook with the blanket around our shoulders, pressed close, our breath visible in the cold. Lucas cleared his throat. "I don't have something fancy prepared," he said. "Good," I said. "Neither do I." He smiled faintly, then sobered. "Olivia," he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like home. "I vow to tell you the truth sooner. I vow to not let fear turn my life into secret rooms. I vow to love you with my whole self, not the edited version." My chest ached. I took a shaky breath. "Lucas," I said, and my voice shook but held. "I vow to make space for the whole you. I vow to ask questions instead of making assumptions. I vow to name my fear instead of letting it control me. And I vow," I swallowed hard, "I vow to let our marriage be a place where we can be complicated without being unsafe." Lucas exhaled, like he'd been waiting for those words for years. We didn't kiss like a movie. We just leaned our foreheads together and breathed, and I felt the strange, quiet power of it. Not the thrill of a new romance, but the deepening of an old one. The kind of love that can survive an honest sentence at midnight. On the drive home, the car smelled like hot chocolate and Lucas's cologne. The freeway was empty again, street lights ticking by in steady rhythm. Lucas reached over and laced his fingers with mine on the console between us. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" I asked. "For staying," he said, "and for making it bigger, not smaller." I stared at our hands, at the way his thumb brushed mine. "I didn't stay because I'm noble," I said. "I stayed because you're worth knowing." He swallowed hard, eyes shining in the dash light. "And you're worth being known by," he said. "Now we have a ritual. The first Sunday of every month, we make coffee, turn off our phones, and sit down with a notebook, not as a weapon, but as a tool. We ask, what felt good this month? What felt scary? What do we need more of? What stays off limits? Sometimes we talk about attraction. Sometimes we talk about work stress. Sometimes we talk about nothing dramatic at all, just the way life can make you forget to look at the person you love. And the best part isn't that everything is perfect. The best part is that perfection is no longer the goal. Honesty is. Lucas is still the man I married. He's also more. And I've learned that more doesn't mean less for me. It means more room, more air, more truth. A stronger vow, not because it ignores fear, but because it makes fear speak and then sets it down gently, together.